Good evening, everyone, and welcome. I hope your day went well. It is halfway through the week, and I'm excited because we take 2 weeks off a year, and next week will be the next one. So I am looking forward to it. I know that many of you still may have to work, so I am praying for you. But tonight we are continuing through Isaiah. We're going to be in chapter 2. And I told you that this book had a lot to it. So as I was rolling through the lesson, I'm trying to cover as much ground as I can. And I made it verses 1 through 11. So I'm hoping as we move along that I don't continue to delve into the intricacies, if you will, of each section. But it's hard not to. Yeah. It's hard not to. So I don't want to spend, maybe we do. Maybe we want to spend 3 years in Isaiah. I don't know. But the beauty of the book is how it is divided, the introductions of different sections. As I go through tonight, I'll try to explain it without going crazy. But even in chapters 2 through 12, they're divided up. They're divided up, So then you get verses or chapter 2 through 4, and then 5 through 12, I believe, are all covering different things. And the emphasis, at least, it's consistent, but it is a phenomenal book. It is a phenomenal book. So let's jump into it tonight. I'll give you the 3 points off the bat, and then we'll get rolling. And the title of the lesson for Isaiah chapter 2, verses 1 through 11 is God Will Have His Way. And point 1 for verses 1 through 3, God's judgment is just and it is complete. And in this, God's kingdom is going to remain first. And not only has it come, it will continue to overcome all else. In our mindset, we have to remember that God must maintain control of us at all seasons. I know that there are difficulties that we face and troubles that we encounter, but if we will constantly submit ourselves before Him, whether it is season of plenty or season of there are fat times and lean times, no matter what it is, if the Lord maintains His position in our life by our humility, we're going to deal with life differently. We're going to see life differently. We're going to, not only that, we're going to encounter one another differently. Very often in the busyness of life, we don't look for ministry opportunities when we're tired. We don't look for them when we're in a hurry. They pop up, and I think it is the grace of God at points that throws things directly in our face in such a manner that we can't avoid it. But Israel, Judah in this sense, was not slowing down. They were not listening to God. They had adopted foreign gods, foreign ways of living. It was a mess. And I think in the church world, we have to look very honestly at the way that we've been interpreting the Bible, the way that we have been considering what is true and is what is not. There's many that are walking around now, speaking into the life of the church, if you will, trying to give direction. And they're quoting scriptures out of context, and they're making decisions on the world stage and trying to bring the church along. The church has to stand back and look at the fruit of each and every one of these situations. And if it is the promise of wealth that we go along with bad ideas, then we're going to end up in the same way Judah did. We will. There's no way around it. And if we begin to idolize people and believe that they are our hope and our Savior and get our eyes off Christ, it's going to be a mess. Point 2 tonight, verse 4. That's all it covers. I'm sorry. I'm trying. God will bring peace to all. And under the rulership of God, who is the rightful ruler of all, every conflict can be resolved. Every conflict will be resolved. In this verse, we're going to talk about the final disposition of things as it relates to the intent of God and the presence of Yahweh. There is peace and there is contentment. Many times the enemy will come, even the things we're seeing in our world right now. People Some people are absolutely clueless as to what is going on, and others are terrified. And I don't think either position is appropriate. I think that we need to be aware and we need to be watchful. But we are, as one of the verses tonight, we're not to have any other gods before us. There can be no one between us and the Messiah, and he is our rescue. And we can live it now. I mean, yeah, we're reading prophecy from the Old Testament as it relates to what God is speaking to his people, but he's speaking also into the future of our lives, declaring his intent and his purpose. And it's very interesting that as you read through Isaiah, there's a discussion of all nations. So many people are discussing the chosen, and you can throw anti whatever you want on it. It's actually exhausting to listen to that. But I think the church has failed to see that God's intention all along was to use a people to bring forth the Messiah, and it was not without trouble. They were a deeply troubled people. And I think in many ways what we see today is a different people. You can argue with me if you want, but if you do any research, you'll figure it out. But it's interesting how the same spirit can possess individuals with a certain mindset. We don't come to God as if we get to do whatever we want. And I think sometimes in Christianity we make that mistake. God will not be mocked. In Galatians, we'll use that verse tonight. Actually, God will speak of that. But the Lord is going to have his way, and he's going to have a pure people. All right? And if you love him, you are seeking to purify your heart. You're not asking God to change. It'd be ridiculous to do so, don't you think? He's asking us to change, because to encounter him is obedience to his commands. And to declare that you don't need to be obedient, oh man, y'all, slow down and really think about what you're saying. And I want to throw this out there. I don't want to ruffle any feathers, but we all have to kind of face the fact that to some degree or another, everybody's sociopathic. All right. Everybody is. We all probably think a lot more about ourselves than anybody else does. And we have very interesting measures for what is success and what is failure. And all of that has to be remapped. All of it has to be remapped for the sake of our relationship with Christ. If you look at the example of Peter, the guy's going through remapping. He's learning different patterns. And one thing about prophets is they were experts in pattern recognition. They were experts in it. They could see it from a mile away. They could smell trouble. And they knew the outcome, because it's always the outcome. It is always the outcome. If you are sowing to destruction, it is always the outcome. It will, every single time. And lastly, for verses 5 through 11, God condemns the proud. He humbles the high-minded, and he alone will be exalted. The Father's intention is to set his people in order. And if you and I are claiming to be his people, God disciplines those he loves. I don't know how we miss that. Hebrews spells it out so plainly. Hebrews spells out a lot. When I first got injured, it was even before that, but I think there was a point that I probably read Hebrews, I think it was something like 10 times in a row. And I studied that book. And it is to reset and reposition the mind of, to whom it's written, right? Hebrews. Well, that book's not written for us because 100% it does. It may not be written to us, but it is written for us. All right. And if you can grasp some of the concepts within that are even the elementary concepts of it, the book makes it plain that there is no sacrifice for habitual sin. And many times we preach over this because it's the idea of having a God that is graceful and merciful and forgiving. it's fantastic, but I think we begin to draw outside the lines, and we'll see that in Isaiah tonight, that there's a point where God says through Isaiah that he's not going to forgive. And I think the intention of that statement, I could be wrong, but as I read it, is that, because there's translation issues here and there, but he's not going to overlook what they've done. He's not letting it go. Like, the path that they have chosen is it, and they're not getting out of it this time. And that's, I think many times we call that tough love. I just think it's probably actually love. I think it really is just exactly that, love. So join with me. Let's jump into it. We're going to read verses 1 through 4, and then we'll cover points 1 and 2. All right, we'll break them down as we go, and we'll probably revisit the passage as we go. But point 1 again, God's judgment is just and complete. So once again, we have an introduction. Chapter 2 has an introduction. So remember, in chapter 1, we have an introduction. Chapter 2, we have an introduction, which is unique in some ways or another, but it sets chapter 1 apart. And chapter 1 definitely sets the stage for all things to come thereafter. All right. Verse 1. The word which Isaiah the son of Amoz saw concerning Judah and Jerusalem. Now it will come about that in the last days, that means in the future, the mountain of the house of the Lord will be established as the chief of the mountains and will be raised above the hills. All right. We'll explain a little bit of this as we dive in. And all the nations will stream to it, and many peoples. So all the nations, that's something to make note of. Not one nation, not one people, right? All the nations will stream to it, and many peoples will come and say, come, let's go up to the mountain of the Lord, to the house of the God of Jacob, so that he may teach us about his ways. Now notice what their focus is. Notice what their hunger is for. It is for instruction. And that we may walk in his paths. For the law will go out from Zion, and the word of the Lord from Jerusalem. And he will judge between the nations and will mediate for many peoples. And they will beat their swords into plowshares and their spears into pruning knives. Now, plowshares are exactly what it is. They're pieces of a plow. And their spears into pruning knives. I don't think I have to tell you what that is. Nation will not lift up a sword against nation, and never again will they learn war. Now notice this, when it comes to the rulership of Yahweh, under his rule, there's contentment, and there's peace, and there's rest. And it is not just for one people. I think many people don't understand all of the conflicts that are currently unfolding around the world. People don't realize there isn't just one religion that wants to destroy Christianity or needs Christianity destroyed. In fact, European Christians are under considerable attack and considerable pressure. Not in the same way, I would say not in the same way that we see with our brothers and sisters in Africa, as far as being put to death. But the introduction of perversion in mass scale and the demoralization of the people and the difficulty of their living situation. Every time you begin to see laws that make no sense, that prioritize feelings over truth and criminalize truth, that is communism. All right? That is the same thing that happened with the Bolsheviks in Russia, to the point that if you said certain things, it could be a capital offense. It could be that bad. And so I want you to cherish your free speech and not be afraid to use it. The church needs to rise up and wake up. We need to wake up. All right? We need to wake up. We can't spend our time being Disney adults. And I'm not trying to black pill anybody or scare anyone. I'm just saying that the church has to arise and take its rightful place. nation was founded as a Christian nation, and to abandon it, and this is by no means, and the word escapes, or I think it's xenophobia, right? That's not what I'm talking about. It's not a particular color or whatever else, but it is a culture, and it is a Christian culture. And a Christian culture has to be led by Christians. It has to. So we need to get our voting system figured out. We need to get the fraud out. And we need to get other elements out of our government. 100%. 100%. So let's jump into point 1 again for verses 1 through 3. God's judgment is just and it is complete. Firstly, God's kingdom has and will overcome all else. Death, hell, and the grave were taken captive. And for the Christian, death is no longer the same threat as it is for others. Our introduction to Christ has relieved us, right? And in that, death has no victory or sting anymore. It is true that we would mourn. That's absolutely normal. But we don't mourn in the same way or the same fashion. In a short period of time, now 8 years ago, with being the last, but I lost my grandfather, my uncle, my grandmother, my mom, my father-in-law. I mean, it was just back to back to back, all of these different passing. And the one thing I understood in that was that I was facing a transition with regard to their life and their reality and mine as well. And in some of that, like my mom being a prayer warrior, I quickly understood, and my grandparents as well, I quickly understood that it was going to now be incumbent upon me to pick up that mantle and to begin to pray in the fashion that they prayed. And so when we look at the scriptures, God is asking them to focus on the things that he has stated as the priority. So in our introduction to chapter 2, it focuses on the reality of God's reign and points to its inevitability, like it is going to happen. God makes it clear that his ultimate intent is to draw all nations and all people to Zion. It was not to be secluded. It was not to be just for one. It was to be for all that were willing to receive him and to pursue him. And notice the attitude, right? They're heading up the hill to learn from him. They are on a pilgrimage, if you will, to encounter the one true God and to know him. And that's the position of heart that we have to have daily. And we're never going to learn everything we need to know about God here and actualize it. That's what grace is for. It's impossible. We please him with the silliness of what it is that it points that we accomplish. When you look at a holy God and we look at our works, I'm thinking, how are you still not annoyed? But he's not. He's a rewarder of those that diligently seek him. How interesting Hebrews reports what Isaiah had already foretold. It is clear that God has not come to a specific chosen people, but he has chosen for all who will seek him to be his people. He has chosen for all who will seek him that they will be his people. And the priority of the Father in the modern day, if we look at it, is the church. And even then it was the church. Christ will build his church and the gates of hell will not prevail. This is just fact. God foreknew that Christ was to come through the people of Israel, but they were a rebellious group and they regularly refused to learn. They regularly were self-absorbed and they were focused on prophets, and not prophets as in Isaiah, prophets as in money. And under Uzziah and Jeroboam II for Israel, under Uzziah for Judah, they prospered. And the more they prospered, the more they failed. There are points, folks, that God's no, when he says no to us, he knows exactly what certain things would do to us. He already knows. What we see most often today as we are dealing with the world around us, right? And we talk about Israel, we talk about different things that are going on. There are those that hold to the idea of one chosen people. Now, God did choose them, and I'm not going to try to get off the rails tonight or any number of things, but we have to look at what Scripture declares. Does God have a plan and intent for the people of Israel? Absolutely. Okay. I don't disagree whatsoever. But it is clear that, and Paul writes this, that branches were cut off that were natural branches, and grafted in was you and I through Christ. Those that are obedient to Christ are grafted in. And we're not just grafted in as a subset or whatever else. We were wild branches, but we were brought in and grafted into this relationship with God. And it is clear that those who should have known Jesus when he arrived rejected him. That's fact. And keep this in mind, those who reject Christ have also rejected the Father. So you can do a little research on things and look at it as to what is and what isn't. But I will tell you that early on, at least in Protestant and evangelical circles, I think some things got out of whack. I think we got out of whack as it relates to where we are looking and what we are focusing on to know whether God is doing something or not. Okay? And I keep saying this, and I want it to be clear. The Bible is there for all to read. Okay? And if you are of a religion that would reject the New Testament, and you're dealing with people you want to control, then you'll embrace aspects of the New Testament, and if you will, emulate them for the sake of convincing people that we are in a certain time in a certain season. And Christians have to wake up to this. Our book is out there to be read. It's out there to be studied. It's out there to be used. Okay? And if you don't know the word, if you don't truly know the word, you will be manipulated and you will be twisted up. It's what they do in operations like that. It's pretty normal, okay? If you think about the last season and all the trust and concern that people had about certain things going on throughout the world, it was a global thing. They looked to certain communities, specifically the medical community, to tell them what to do. And that community failed massively. While they were telling us that they were overwhelmed, they're producing dance videos. And you have to realize that, like I mentioned earlier, communism and that mindset is just as religious as any other quote-unquote religion. And so they are dedicated. They are dedicated to their cause. I will say, though, that I'm going to double check, but it looks like the House passed a resolution concerning transgender surgeries for minors. And I know that there are medical facilities already shutting down any such care for anyone under 18. So that's fantastic. Yeah. That's fantastic. Now we're getting somewhere. In chapter 2, verses 2 through 4, and at the close of this section, like I mentioned, chapter 2 versus chapter 4, and we see that with chapter 4, verses 2 through 6, God clearly describes his intentions for Zion. So if you want to flip over to chapter 4, verses 2 through 6, he discusses his intention for Zion and his restorative work. Isaiah 4, 2 through 6, on the day the branch of the Lord will be beautiful and glorious, and the fruit of the earth will be the pride and the beauty of the survivors of Israel. And it will come about that the one who is left in Zion and remains behind in Jerusalem will be called holy. Everyone who is recorded for life in Jerusalem when the Lord has washed away the filth of the daughters of Zion and purged the bloodshed of Jerusalem from her midst by the spirit of judgment and the spirit of burning. Then the Lord will create over the entire area of Mount Zion and over her assemblies a cloud by day and smoke. Now we have images of the desert, do we not? And smoke and the brightness of the flaming fire by night. For over all the glory will be a canopy, and there will be shelter to give shade from the heat by day and refuge and protection from the storm of and the rain. Isaiah in chapters 2 through, or I mentioned this, in chapters 2 through 12, it is broken up into the two sections, chapters 2 through 4, and then again 5 through 12. And each section brings forth the reality of how God intends to restore Israel. God also goes into the process that he is going to take Israel through, and that it is longer and more difficult than anyone was initially willing to accept. And this is typical, folks. It is typical that man will seek to idealize what is in his favor, like they'll make it the best, like free cookies, right? I share this story, I have permission, but there's mindsets as it relates to when we go up to something and we look at things. And I always have this mindset of free cookies are only going to be as good as free cookies. You have others who they have in their mind that this opportunity, at least it relates to free cookies, is going to be fantastic and wonderful and whatever else. I, on the other hand, sometimes I look at situations, and if it is not in my favor, I want to see how long it takes to get around that thing or not deal with that particular thing instead of taking it head on. And there are times I have to slow down and realize that starting something new or working on something else is not going to make things go faster, right? I like having multiple projects, don't I, babe? And I did get my Beamer running. It's an old Beamer, so don't think I'm too bougie, all right? It's an old Beamer, and it needs to be supercharged. But we're talking about that. I think I'm winning, but we're talking about it. But God gives us glimpses, right? And so Israel and Judah, they're hearing the prophets. They're taking what they think is favorable, blowing it out of proportion, and they're diminishing what they think is not favorable. And so they're continuing to do all the things that they're being warned not to do. And so God is giving us glimpses of his intention to restore Zion. He explains the consequences of the destructive path that they have chosen. And they chose it because they are rebellious. He has taken note of their decisions, and their current state is absolutely unacceptable. Now, in God's depiction of Zion, he uses this term, right? At least Isaiah uses it, last days, or in the future. And this statement is a guarantee that the things that God has laid out will occur. The position, remember this discussion of the Mount Zion, the position of a mountain in Eastern mindsets was in essence a place belonging to God's. And so God says, this is going to be my home. This is going to be where people are drawn to. I don't think it's a very tall mountain, but it is his mountain, right? But God is also addressing the fact that Israel has issues with doing idol worship and perverse practices in high places. And his point in essence is, not only will I set up my kingdom, but these other things do not belong. If you look at Exodus 20, surprise, surprise, verses 2 through 4, it says this: I am the Lord your God who brought you out of the land of Egypt, out of the house of slavery. Immediately in this verse, God has set his position very clearly before the people. I am the one that rescued you. You should clearly serve me. In fact, you owe me. You shall have no other gods before me. You shall not make for yourself an idol or any likeness of what is in heaven above, or on the earth beneath, or in the water under the sea. But guess what? They did. Point 2 tonight, God will bring peace to all. Let's read verse 4 again. Verse 4. And he will judge between the nations, and will mediate for many peoples, and they will beat their swords into plowshares, and their spears into pruning knives. Nation will not lift up sword against nation, and never again will they learn war. This declaration is simple, that under the rulership of God, who is the rightful ruler of all, every conflict will be resolved. And in the presence of Yahweh, there is contentment, there is peace, and there is provision. No one is needing to go out and do anything other than what they have been instructed to do. And that is something you and I can live in right now. There are conflicts that we're invited into regularly that we need to spit out the hook, right? We've been baited into certain situations. We've been invited into certain situations in which we have no authority, and there's really no point being there. And you say, well, what do you call ministry? Ministry occurs in obedience. Ministry occurs in obedience. That's it. Ministry occurs in obedience. And things that are occurring that are disobedient, even if beneficial, are not going to minister to your soul. Others might. I mean, if we look at some of the things that have occurred around the world right now, there are people, and I'll say this, what's the word? I'm going to allude to certain things. There have been people that have taken center stage in certain situations, right? Who were becoming increasingly convinced about the nature of Christ, and not everyone else around them was. To whatever degree that person had truly embraced Christ, their influence, at least for many, were choices for righteousness, right? Purchases of Bibles went up, any number of things. I think that's a positive, right? As long as we keep in mind that person was not God. They spoke of God. They spoke about God. And many of the things that they spoke about God were dead on. But it is important in our lives that just because people fail us who have discussed the nature of God does not mean the nature of God has changed. It means that they have once again regressed or degraded to choosing their old life and their old way of thinking. I will also say this. There are conservative influencers. There are both male and female. There are people who speak Christianese who are not Christians. They may put forth a certain understanding of morality, but they are not to be trusted. And you have to hear me on this. I really don't care who they are right now. I don't care who they are. You have to know this. Where there isn't resistance, or where there's a specific type of resistance, there's endorsement. And some of the things you're seeing play out right now are just simply operations to mess with the minds of people. And you have to stay focused on Christ. You have to stay focused on Christ. Whatever the controversy is, whatever the mystery is, whatever the conspiracy is, if your mind is wandering away from the throne of God, they're winning. The way you overcome tyrants and all of this is to live a good life. They can't defeat that. Refuse to be bought out. They can't defeat that. They cannot take that from you. All right? And we saw this. Trust me. When we stood against the shutdown, trust me, there is a massive amount of pressure applied to you. Okay? It's applied. And you're either ready for it or you're not. And I've watched even things go on recently with pastors being brought into the inner circle, if you will, and just destroying their ministry, just destroying their platform. Why? Because they feel included. They feel invited into something. I have little taste for that. All right. When we went through the shutdown, I got invited to all kinds of stuff. I didn't go. I just didn't go. All right. Especially once I started figuring out how many people in that circle are involved in Scientology. I was like, I don't think so. Nah, I'm good. I'm good. But yes, it is something that we can live now as it relates to contentment and peace. We must allow ourselves to be settled by the Father and for his hand to shape and mold our understanding of who he is. It means we have to abandon all of this other stuff so that we can get a clear picture of what it is that God intends. This passage that we just read is specifically addressing the reign of Christ. And you'll find other language in Isaiah that's similar, discussing a kingdom of peace. Chapter 9, chapter 11 has it, chapter 32. But those to a degree are differing in some way or another as it relates to a discussion of a Davidic reign or Davidic king ruling on God's behalf. This is specifically about the leadership and the rulership of Christ. In the New Testament, we find also a similar writing. If you guys want to turn to Revelation chapter 20, verses 10 through 15. I know. You're like, it's 8:05 and we're still on point 2. I know. I told you, I want to say this, and you heard me. This book has a lot in it, and I like it. I like it a lot. I want to try to teach themes over chapters and everything else, and no. We'll do what we can, but no. Listen here, Revelation 20, 10 through 15. And the devil who deceived them was thrown into the lake of fire and brimstone, where the beast and the false prophet are also, and they will be tormented day and night forever and ever. Okay? Notice this, that the torment of the lake of fire is forever and ever. All right? So, all of what we understand right now will be terminated in its operation. But what we see is the eternal torment, day and night, forever and ever, that occurs in the lake of fire. There's some people that have a real issue with eternal torment. I think that you need to slow down. Okay? You need to slow down and read the scripture for what it says. And if it puts you on your heels, then it's a good time to think about the way you're considering Christianity and the way you're looking at the afterlife. Okay? Verse 11. Remember, we're reading out of Isaiah here, and God wipes out a bunch of this. Right? Exiles, all like a bunch of them. There's a remnant, there's people that stay behind, and then he only comes back with roughly 50,000. Okay? They come through the desert over a certain age, everybody died. Verse 11, then I saw a great white throne, and him, capital H, who sat upon it, from whose presence earth and heaven fled, and no place was found for them. And I saw the dead, the great and the small, standing before the throne, and the books were open, and another book was opened, which is the book of life, and the dead were judged from the things which were written in the books according to their, what's the word? Their belief, their feelings, their emotions. What are they judged on? What are they judged on? What's the word, babe?
Done in mind. What they have done.
What they have done? Sure. Mm-hmm. That's the NIV, right?
Yes.
In the NASB, it is deeds. And the sea gave up the dead who were in it. All right. This is just a rehash of something else. It's not like God picked people that had drowned to come later, okay? And death and Hades gave up the dead who were in them, and they were judged, each one of them according to their deeds. Then death and Hades were thrown into the lake of fire. This is the second death, the lake of fire. And if anyone's name was not found written in the book of life, he was thrown into the lake of fire. Let's jump back up real quick to verse 10, where the beast and the false prophet are also, and they will be tormented day and night, forever and ever. Done. Done. Point 3. So far, I'm at 39 minutes. Okay? And I've covered 4 verses. I apologize to a degree, and then I'm not sorry at all. God condemns the proud, humbles the high-minded, and he alone will be exalted. Verses 5 through 11. Come, house of Israel, and let's walk in the light of the Lord. For you, capital Y, have abandoned, capital Y, your people, the house of Jacob. Who? God. There was a rift. That's what that means. There was a rift. Because they are filled with influences from the east. Notice this. The division occurred between them and God because of the eastern influences, which is simply this. They were incorporating other belief systems, other gods. They were superstitious, and they are soothsayers like the Philistines. This is witchcraft. This is abomination, right? It is unacceptable. And this includes diviners, right, who claimed that they could talk to other gods, and that was strictly outlawed. Unacceptable. Unacceptable. So they were asking God to accept the unacceptable, and they wanted to remain prosperous. And while Israel had already fallen, right, Judah is continuing on the same path, like just stupid on fast forward, as we call it. They are soothsayers like the Philistines. They also strike bargains with the children of foreigners. In other words, they're making deals as it relates. They're making agreements. Okay, they're bringing outside influences into what God had asked to be pure. Their land has also been filled with silver and gold. Remember again, under Uzziah, the people of Judah were prosperous, and there is no end to their treasures. Their land has been filled with horses, and there is no end to their chariots. Their land has been filled with idols. Suddenly a transition, right? Wealth, 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 idols. And some of these things were not supposed to even be in Israel, but we can do that later. They worship the works of their hand, that which their fingers have made. So the common person has been humbled, and the person of importance has been brought low. But do not forgive them. Enter the rocky place and hide in the dust from the terror of the Lord and from the splendor of his majesty. It's interesting that they would hide from both, right? They, in essence, had made God their enemy because they had chosen the works of their hand over the works of God. The proud look of humanity will be brought low, and the arrogance of the people will be humbled, and the Lord alone will be exalted on that day. Now, this day does not sound like a positive thing for the people that are in rebellion. It is, don't get me wrong, it is, because it puts an end to them destroying themselves. Remember, we talked about this earlier, that if God let them continue, they would ultimately end up like Sodom and Gomorrah. There would be nothing left. And so before they completely destroy themselves, God intervenes, and in a fashion that would to some seem unforgiving, right? I thought God overlooks this. I thought God lets this go. These people were filthy. They were really filthy. They were idolatrous. They were butchers. They were terrible, okay? Some of the practices, as it even relates to it in Baal worship, like human sacrifice and the rest, some of that still unfolds today. Okay, we're not quite ready to accept all of that yet, but it happens. Okay, it even happens certain times a year in specific instances. We're not ready to realize all of that. Okay, it's coming, but again, we have to remember any religion that rejects Christ has also rejected the Father. And so the only God left at that point is going to be a false God. And a false god is only empowered through the work of the enemy, correct? So it boils down to devil worship. That's it. That's it. And if you're trying to work your way around that, you're involved in witchcraft. And I mean you, not you, but whoever you are that's doing that. Okay. That's clear, right?
Yes.
Not you, unless you are doing that. So in this, again, the Father's intention is to set his people in order. In verse 5, it calls them specifically to walk in the light or to repentance. Come to repentance. Why? Because their sin had created a rift between God. But it was such a significant rift, it doesn't sound like even saying I'm sorry at this point is going to end what is unfolding for them. Instead of following God, they had adopted the sins of foreign peoples and were practicing them. They had become superstitious. They had become sensual. They had been involved with the diviners or diviners and that allowed them in their midst. And this was outlawed in Israel. These are people who claim to have direct access to the gods. All this was foreign to the way that God had ordered them to live. All of it was unacceptable. And with the wealth that they had gained, there came complacency. There came degradant behavior. Not decadent, degradant. Judah had prospered under the rule of Uzziah, but their attentions, instead of thanking God for it, they had turned in on themselves and they had become idolatrous. As they prospered, they failed. Their idols were their death. Their idols brought death. God was not going to overlook this. Israel had pushed it too far, and God was determined to humble them before they destroyed themselves. So for us, what is the lesson? Well, tonight it's verses 1 through 11. But tomorrow, and maybe even as we pray this evening, it should serve to us as an example and a warning. A lot of people forget that the teaching of the New Testament came out of the Old Testament. There was no New Testament yet. There was the teaching of the New Testament, but there wasn't a quote-unquote New Testament. God's going to receive all the glory no matter what. We can either be a part of it or we can distance ourselves from it. We can reject it because we're proud, or we can learn to humble ourselves and kneel before his throne instead of trying to take it. Whatever circumstance or situation you're facing, if you do it in your own power, you're going to sow and you're going to reap. And if you don't like some of the decisions you've made in the past, it is a great opportunity right now to stop and to begin to consider the fact that God has good intentions. Maybe it means you go without something. Maybe it means you miss out on an opportunity. Maybe it means that the relationship you wanted doesn't materialize. It would be better to deal with want and loneliness than to be found in rebellion. It would be better to deal with heartache and to struggle than to be found outside his will. Galatians 6 through 8 tonight. The one who is taught the word is to share all good things with the one who teaches him. Do not be deceived. God is not mocked. And I'm not taking an offering. That's not why we're there on this verse. Do not be deceived. God is not mocked. For whatever a person sows, this he will also reap. For the one who sows to his flesh will reap destruction from the flesh, but the one who sows to the Spirit will reap eternal life from the Spirit. I love you guys. I'm rooting for you. There's sometimes I probably say things that seem harsh or hard, but it's because we need to wake up. We really do. We really got to wake up. Don't allow the enemy to get your peace. Don't allow the enemy to get your peace. Rest in the fact that God is able to overcome anything and everything you're facing. And as we head into this Christmas season, be reminded that he came for a very specific person, and that was to bring life. That all who would believe in him would not perish, but have everlasting life. Rejoice in that fact. Know that you are loved. Know that his intent for you is good. Listen to his words. Block out all the other voices. Face the reality that on our best day, we're not good enough. That's just a fact. And be grateful for his grace. He loved us in spite of all that we were. There's hope. I'll see you soon. Sunday morning, 11:15, Eagles Lodge. You guys take care.